Good morning, folks, uh, wherever you're joining in from. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on the time zone you're joining. My name is Bashir Fancy. I'm the President and CEO of BIZTEK, which is Business and Technology Professional Association of Canada, where education, certification, mentoring, thinking forward organization that's connected to British Computer Society and many other organizations. And we've been bringing these fancy that sessions each week. It's a conversation that change our world. And a lot of you who have participated before have seen Nick Brown, who's at the moment in California, and who was a developer. When I say developer, he's the one who actually put together the debit system for Visa globally. Somebody does know a thing or two about these payment systems very, very well. And so what we have been doing is a series about global mobile wallets and some of the challenges that are actually posed. So today we have a very interesting conversation for everybody because it does significant impact is being had in developing countries, but it is true anywhere else too. So everybody needs to take a step back and think about it as to how this impacts African countries. Have to take a hell of a lot more interest because we will explain to you why the problem. So first and foremost, good morning, Nick, and thank you again for doing this.
Good morning. This has been we've had some enjoyable conversations so far. Really starting to delve into some of the details. So I've enjoyed it.
Fantastic. And we're going to make it again here. Now, a couple of things to get out of the way as we get into this conversation, question, answer, is that we understand, and I'll fire this off right off the bat to get it out of the way. And that is that some of the countries in Africa have actually told us that they're under a lot of pressure from government, in this particular case, US government, which is talking about getting rid of the privacy rules and regulations, whatever, which is kind of weird because of the fact that everything we're going to talk about is how do you protect your information and how do governments keep control of that? Because one of the problems is going to be if you don't protect your privacy, just you need to remember one thing, nobody else is. So you need to get serious. Now, in this payment side of business, Nick has got a fantastic diagram he'll put up there in a minute, and we can have this conversation as to how do you protect, if you are in a developing country, how do you provide this service to your bank, unbanked, whatever, and at the same time be in control, because in the last few sessions, we have talked about the fact that if you don't do this properly, countries can lose complete control of their financial system. And if you lose financial system control, you have got not much left because taxation, whatever you do, it all comes through the monetary policies. So, Nick, why don't you want to start with the diagram, or you want to first lay out the issue? What?
Just at a really high level,
Right.
The financial industry is in the business of data security and privacy. And it's not doing it because it's the right thing to do. It's doing it because it's essential for the business. And so if you want to talk to people who understand data security and privacy, you really can't talk to better people than bankers. Having said that, how can we then extend that data security and privacy to other industries without imposing too much work onto it as far as the individual for securing their own data? So we've been getting into those conversations. How can we extend financial data security into other areas of like medical and other industries, and just securing people's data in general? I can't hear you.
My apologies. Why at the high level, what you just said is accurate. One of the problems is not just the fact that the banks may be good, may not be good at data security, because I think that is somewhat also overblown. But nevertheless, and I manage operations at the bank, and I can tell you, but it's the issue is not necessarily the security issue, it's the governance problem. What we are seeing, the recent report that actually a lot of people would have seen, we posted on our website, is that some of the banks were involved in actually money laundering, facilitating money laundering. So did they have security in place? They probably did. But what is the use of that if your higher level policies and governance at the top actually allows you to facilitate that? So this problem gets dealt with what we're talking about. Now, that doesn't mean every single bank out there is bad. That's not what we're saying. We're saying you have to make sure that you protect yourself. That's my thing, is that how do we do this thing? So Nick's right. So
I'd like to jump in on recognizing one part of that, of what you just said. Yeah, I was rather horrified when you told me about this. One of the things to bear in mind, though, is the sheer fact that everything is electronic means that there is a record of everything. And at some point, someone's going to find out. And this is what happened here. It's like when you get a fully electronic economy, you can't hide. You can maybe for a while, but eventually everything comes to light because people will dig in to the details 5 years, 10 years later and discover what's been going on. And that's what's really happened here. So, I mean, the good side is people actually found out that it was going on.
Yeah, it took them many years, but they did find out. That's right. And it was global journalists who had to dig deep. But yes, but the question I think is like for security people that we talk about these days, and that's a good area you talk about. Is I don't tell people, by the way, if you think people are not going to get into your system, then you better think again, because the issue is more about how do you protect your data. If somebody does get in, then trying to stop them in, because when you have people getting into a network and staying for 330 days before they're discovered, they're not there to have a party. They're there to study exactly who's communicating with whom, what type of transactions, what type of encryption. So that is a very good point what you're making. So what do you do here? I mean, you can't just wait for the authorities to protect you, because that's not going to happen. We are seeing a lot of things that are happening nowadays all over the world that actually perhaps undermine that. So question is, what do you do? If you're the government in the country and you've got a banking system, what do you do whereby you allow those things to happen, but you still have the oversight, right? Like we always talked about segregation of roles. And so that's a good point to make, and we've got that out there. So,
well, one of the things that, again, we have to be aware of, and this has been an integral part of the conversations, is that a government only really has authority over the companies that have a physical presence within their country.
Very good point.
That's really important. I mean, there is no way Brazil is dealing with this right now with WhatsApp payments, is that they have no control over or ability to enforce regulations. You can apply regulations and Facebook will either abide by them or not. The reality is Brazil has no say over them. They have no control because there's no physical presence of WhatsApp payments within Brazil.
Correct. And then what happens is by the time sometimes government wakes up, the horse has left the barn and you are in trouble. Now you're playing a catch-up game. Right?
Yes. Now, what Brazil did was the moment the proposal came along, they immediately said, no, we're not going to allow this until we've figured things out. So good for them. So we'll see what they do in the end. But that was a good move on their part to, like, the instinctive reaction. No, we need to figure things out first before we let you in here. Right. Because that's the only time. Once they're in, it's too late.
So that leads to a very good question, what you just brought up. You can't, as a government or whatever, keep saying, no, you can't do this. Because if the people start to go there, how do you stop it? And the question is, where you stop it is you provide them a better option. You provide them a more secure option. You provide them a low-cost option, so that, and it's a local option. So people will go there because they can still do what they want to do. And that's how M-Pesa started in Kenya, right? To fulfill a need. That need has not disappeared. The need is still there, right? So you're absolutely right. So the
so
Brazil,
a government can delay. I mean, the Brazilian government can delay WhatsApp payments for a while.
right?
Ultimately, though, people can just decide to start using it, and there's no way of stopping WhatsApp and Facebook really offering payments on their WhatsApp app. There's no way of stopping them if they just decide to do it and people decide they want to use it. Because it's the only way you could stop it is literally blocking WhatsApp completely. And now you have 120 million very upset people in Brazil who suddenly can't use WhatsApp anymore.
Although you could change it by saying, by the way, this is what they're doing, and
Yes.
that is not helping you, but here's what we've done for you.
Exactly. The real solution is to offer better, to offer more, or at the very least offer the same through the existing providers, mobile wallets, banks, all of them. If you can offer the same service, then there's no incentive to move.
Correct. So now let's start that. That's a very good segue into the fact that WhatsApp, as we've talked many times in Brazil and elsewhere, have tried to do that in Canada. The central bank has taken Interact under its wing. It was never there before, to say, hang on, you guys are transferring money and it's not under the purview of the central bank. It ain't going to happen anymore. So they've taken that, and that model is not a bad one for other countries to try and say, you're going to be transacting money, you better be under the central bank.
Yes.
Right? So then you can, so now, given that,
again, it's only a temporary solution to a completely independent global mobile wallet, though. It's only temporary because the Canadian government has no say over Facebook's mobile wallet. WhatsApp
But they do. They can actually, just like today, I saw the announcement, Pakistan said, okay, blocking TikTok because it doesn't meet this requirement. India has done similar things. Other countries can turn and say, the problem is not that the governments can do. Problem is that some people can be influenced through money or whatever to undercut that. That is the danger. And that is not necessarily the right thing, but the big companies will do that. And so they're going to be, right?
The thing is, that's going to be available anyway. It just might, the governments can make it a little bit more difficult for people to do that. But companies that have ill intent, let's put it that way, will find a way of using that payment method. And so the goal is to, again, you can't stop it from happening. You can delay it. You can slow it down. The only way to stop it is to actually have a better system.
So here's the question for you then.
Yes.
Given what we've just talked about, why is the US government putting pressure on this couple of African countries to do away with the privacy rules and allow them to get into those countries? The minute they do that, guess what? You can forget about that country having sovereign control over their own affairs, because now it could be Facebook, it could be whoever else. Because if that's not the reason, why is the government, and the worst part is whoever's negotiating right now needs to think very seriously, because why are you negotiating with a government, any government that's about to go out of office? You want to negotiate, you wait to see what comes out, and then you make decisions. But you don't negotiate these. Like if you were CEO of a company and I was negotiating with you for my country or company, isn't it smart when I know you're about to go out and you're in a lot of trouble and there are some ethical issues or governance issues that hold it up and saying, hang on, well, this may not be the right way to do business. Take a step back and then go at it when you know that issue is clarified, so you know you don't negotiate with the sitting duck anywhere in the world, doesn't matter where it is. So using the same principle to those countries, take a time out, as I say, and understand this problem much more deeper, broader, and that's what we're going to do today here, to explain to you how you could do it and maintain control and not get caught out here. So to all the points you made, which are very valid, that if you don't give it to them, people will find a way around it. So you don't want them to do that because you're going to look after them. You also get blown out of office if you don't give them the proper service. Then at some point in time, the citizens in the country go, this is not the government that's doing anything for me.
Let us use this service.
Right, correct. So they need to deal with that. That's a very good point. So maybe it's a good point to show then how can the countries, um, given this Brazil situation, how can they do it and provide service to their citizens to allow them not only to operate within their own countries but do interoperability so they can do business elsewhere that the model allows that. And I think you have a fantastic way to explain that, right?
Yes, I mean, at the base level, I build payment rails,
Right.
and we had the diagram. We didn't actually show it last time, but it's been available. A diagram showing the two different layers of the payment rails, which
Right.
are the authorization layer, which is where Visa and MasterCard are, and Clear Purchase, the company I've created, is. And then you have the funds transfer layer, which is the ACH system, SWIFT for international, and you've got Ripple as a new company in the field looking to do those international transfers.
Yeah.
But those are two different things. One transfers the actual money between the different financial institutions,
right.
And the other is the real-time authorization of what people want to actually transact. So that's credit, debit cards, and my system as well.
Right.
And those are international.
Exactly.
So being able to do those transactions, streamlining those transactions is one of the key parts of protecting against the damage of people shifting all their money over to the global mobile wallets.
Right.
Global mobile wallets, anyone can transact with anyone else easily. We need to build the infrastructure that does the same, but still leaves the banks and mobile money systems and mobile wallets for local ones, and everyone else still able to offer services. But they are part now of a bigger network that allows all these transactions as well.
And I think the diagram will do a lot of justice in explaining, but you're right. It starts at payment side of things, at different parts of payment system. But it becomes more than payments.
All right. Do you see that?
Yep.
Okay, good. Yeah, so while we're talking about information in general, we're starting on a basic level of the payment rails, the authorization layer of the payment rails. And that's really what I bring to the game, is because, and Bashir does as well, but more of an understanding and security and a broader umbrella of everything. I'm very much the technical guy that builds these systems. So this is a diagram that I put together about what Clear Purchase is, the company I started in the system I'm building, what it could end up becoming. It would obviously start by being payments, and central to that is connecting banks, the mobile money operators, and mobile wallets together so that anybody with an account at any of them can transact with anybody else. It's the interoperability. And that includes international transactions. So you see at the top, it connected into the ACH system for local transfers and connected into SWIFT or whoever else for international transfers. So that's really where it's starting from. However, it can go way beyond that. And because these are new rails that are, so central to the rails that I've designed, because I've very specifically designed this, and I've spent 18 years doing this, the intellectual property behind this. I've designed it so that a transaction can be processed without the need for identifying the users within the Clear Purchase system. So they are anonymous transactions. And really what that means is that there's no sensitive information being transmitted anywhere. And we will connect in, certainly with the mobile money operators and the mobile wallets, we'll be connecting to them using Mojaloop, which was developed by the Gates Foundation. The connecting into the banks, those are legacy systems. That's the world I'm from. I know how to connect into those systems as well. And it's actually way more complex, but there's a reason why it is. And that is those are massively secure connections. Whereas the mobile money and the mobile wallets run over the internet, and we add the security into that as opposed to it's inherent in the connection. So
one of the things, in case somebody missed it. What Nick is talking about when he used the word financial institution, it is whoever. It is your banks. It could be fintechs. I mean, M-Pesa, when it started in Kenya, they were not a bank, right? So really, anybody can, if you go into Egypt and you look at Fowry, you look at Yellow Pepper, all the different ones, and some of which I was involved in. They initially did not involve banks, but the banks became party to it, which means there's a nice subtle message by Nick here saying, if you're a bank and you want to continue to play in this game, you better get involved and understand what's going on to take advantage, because these things are moving forward with or without you. And so the sooner you get involved and understand and be able to provide service, not to take control, but to be one of the players. That's why if you look at the list on the right that he's got, from how many different players can do that. The other thing that Nick has talked about, which is very important, is that if you're, and I'm going to equate it to PCI DSS, when I was kind of writing the standards with my team for Visa, one of the challenges, what was the problem we're trying to stop? Is the fraud. Because the fraud is massive on the credit card, debit card side. Here, if your card's not going through and you don't know who it is, who's the purchaser, can you imagine you just brought the level down? I mean, I'd like to say we can bring fraud down to zero. It will never be zero because there's bad guys who try to do something new each day. But the potential here, there are more things we're not necessarily getting into that you see in the highest level that Nick's talked about, is you can see right at the bottom, but identification. But that's the key. So if you go register, but also on the picture, don't lose sight of the fact he's got a big box, this national government. Those are the government rules that play into it, right? Nick, stop me anytime. I'm just trying to rephrase. That's the government. So that if you were in Nigeria, you were in Ghana, you were in Kenya, you were whatever countries in Africa, for that matter, anywhere here, the payment rails are following the government rules, and they have full oversight into that, which means local transactions are remaining local, data is remaining, no WhatsApp or Facebook is taking data anywhere, it's staying local. What changes is if I'm buying something from United Kingdom or buying something from somewhere else, in Europe or Asia or wherever the heck you're buying the stuff from, now your transaction is crossing the borders. But you can also see that. Why the government needs to see that is the example we started right at the start of this thing, is the anti-money laundering. Because if you're not careful, just like a credit card or any other system in the banking system has been used to facilitate, we're talking about trillions of dollars, not billions. That has already happened. So we're not talking about what might happen. It's already happened. So you can stop that. The government can see what's going on. And that is a very, very powerful point that Nick's been making for X number of days and even today. Did I say something out of school there?
No, you're very right. One of the things to be aware of, and this is a question that I've been asked, is like, well, you're not going to have a physical presence in every country, so aren't you doing the same thing? And of course, the answer to that is no, in the same way that Visa and MasterCard, we're in the same boat in that we don't exist in a country unless we're connected to banks and mobile money and mobile wallets. We have no direct connection with users, with merchants, businesses. We only do it through other companies that do have a presence. And so yes, we are going to be subject to those regulations that are issued at a government level, because the banks and mobile money operators and mobile wallets that are national are going to be subject to them, and therefore we will be as well. However, what's interesting is it works, in a way, it works the other way around. And this is the good part. And one of the recommendations that we have made in order to avoid the destruction of global mobile wallets and the shift over to them, one of the recommendations is to standardize regulations across national borders. And there are two reasons for that. One of them is that if a business in one country, well, one of the reasons is that mobile wallets have no regulations on them at all. So if businesses want to avoid regulations, they go and use those. That's going to be a draw anyway, unless, and that's a point further on in this conversation. One of the main reasons is that if a business wants to trade with another business in a neighboring country, they know they're on the same regulations because everyone has the same, and so they don't have to learn new regulations. They're already following the regulations in their country, so they know they can trade easily to a neighboring country. That gets rid of one of the draws of mobile wallets. The other one is a little bit more selfish, but it's also really practical. And that is if every country that we go to has the same regulations, we don't have to modify and abide by different regulations. We want everyone to be on the same regulations so we can then easily go from country to country and offer these services internationally. The turning it round, though, makes it very interesting, because really what can happen is that it's the rails that actually enforces regulations. So it's, yes, we will be abiding by government regulations, and the banks will be as well, and mobile money and mobile wallets. But in another way of putting it, we are actually going to be enforcing those regulations for every company that connects to our system. Visa has regulations to connect to Visa. And pretty much the entire card network follows those same regulations that Visa decides, because they're the ones that have to enforce them. And it's the right place to do that. And it's the condition of everybody when they connect to the rails is that they abide by the rules. And that feeds into a lot of especially things like dispute resolution and purchase guarantees and all of that. That's where it really has importance. Because whenever you have one transaction, there's always a buyer and there's a seller. And if there's a dispute, one side's going to be the winner and one side's going to be the loser. And everyone needs to know that everyone else is playing by the same game, so that they will just accept what happens out of that. And purchases and purchase guarantees are, and I've mentioned this before, but it's important to say it, are massively different to a funds transfer. Funds transfer is easy in comparison. You just send money from A to B and eventually it'll get there. And so long as it gets to the right place, everyone's happy. A purchase, though, if you're doing it face-to-face with someone, it doesn't matter so much. But if you do it at a distance where you're buying things online, and it gets delivered and you end up opening the box and it's empty, what do? If there isn't a guarantee associated with it, which really doesn't mean anything unless there's a dispute resolution process and system involved, then you can't do anything. That has to be there in order to allow for internet purchases and mobile purchases. It's got to be there. And I come from that game. So, I've been involved in that at the technical level for over 30 years. So that's integral into what I'm building, is the need for that. But that's an important aspect, especially for international purchases, to still be able to impose purchase guarantees and dispute resolution between two parties that are not in the same country. And we don't really have that very well at the moment. So this is central to what I'm building here.
So we can actually take 3 points out of there to highlight them, because Nick has put some powerful stuff out there, which is, one, if when you talk about dispute resolution and you buy something, it's maybe either the box was empty or maybe they didn't supply you what you paid for. One, potentially you bought an airline ticket and the airline went bankrupt before. Visa protects you on things like that and has done for a long time. The advantage here, and I'm going to pull it out right then, magnify it a little bit, is because the wallets are in the same system, you can instantaneously reverse things. Remember, they're in that big box. It is from one wallet to another wallet. So people can't play games, because you can turn around and reverse that transaction in seconds. So that's one important point. Two, which is even more relevant, is the example that Nick mentioned, and I think you used the word selfish there. I don't think there's anything selfish about it. The bottom line is like European Union, EU, to try and say, these are the rules. You're going to do business across all these 27 countries. These are the rules. Okay? Everybody follows the same rule. You can have more than that in a country, but if you're trading, those are the rules. So the advantage here is, if you're looking at Asia Pacific or look at Africa, the African countries could turn around and say, you don't have to wait for every African country to agree that, okay, we agree. If you want to participate in this, these are the rules. And so those countries start to follow, and those who want to participate in it, which I would think everybody would want to do that, they start to follow, and you make the system better. Remember, you always make the system better from inside. You don't make it better from outside. So you get involved and you say, how about this? Because you're using your use cases, your needs each day, and where you start out is not where you will end up, because you will have more needs. And the most important thing, including using the same rules, leveling the playing field. We think about a lot of things that in Africa, again, I'm using just an example because of a couple of things I was told. If you think about it, the fact that African countries export, they've got phenomenal amount of stuff they export. Can you imagine? You're now exporting and nobody can play games, which we know over invoicing is one. As an example, that people over invoice and then give credit back to the person from whom you bought. Well, guess what? It would become virtually impossible to do that here, right? Because you got the audit trail of what is happening. Whereas
there's a wheel of everything, yes.
Correct. And you are identifying who is doing it. So this is very, very useful in many different ways. Yeah, I remember making a change to some of the rules at Visa. What was the rule that we changed? We changed so that people could not go give credit on a credit card when the original purchase was never there. Because you talk about money laundering, that's a very powerful way to do that. The way as I want to send some $10,000, but I'm not supposed to because it's a bad guy. So what I do is get that credit card number from another country and go to the merchant who's in league with me and pretend that this is a refund because he's returned some stuff. But guess what? He never bought anything. So I refunded. So we changed the system to make sure that matches with the original transaction. If there was no debit of this, you cannot put a credit through, right? Because we know there was no transaction done. This directly, indirectly allows you to do that and more. And
one of the things to remember is that a lot of the issues that have been dealt with over the years with Visa and MasterCard and the card networks, it was learning each step of the way. It was like, here's this great system that was built, and then someone found a problem with it. And okay, we got to figure out how to deal with that. And what we're doing now, and I'd like to say that I come from that world, but I've created a new system, but I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. It's like, we don't have to learn all of these individual issues one after the other because we've already learned them. And so that's already built into this because we know that it's important to do these things. That's already built in. So we, like each of these steps, it sounds crazy to not have had them connected, but it's like no one thought of it. Now someone found a hole in the system and we fixed it. Okay. We're not going to fall for the same traps. That's where I describe it. It's a bit like a minefield that you're walking onto. And if you do an interface connecting from a bank or mobile money or mobile wallet to an interface and a payment switch, it's like you're on the edges of it. And there are issues with being on the edges of it, but not many compared with if you're right in the middle of it. And the payment switch itself is like that's a dangerous place to go unless you really know what you're doing. And
Absolutely.
that's the world that I'm from. I know how to build those systems safely. And one of the important things, and this is important to what I've developed, because as I said, I spent 18 years working on the intellectual property of this. And the goal was to eliminate the majority of payment fraud. And the end result is that this system, the clear purchase system, can facilitate tiny purchases. Those are the most difficult transactions to do, especially when you think of a purchase guarantee and dispute resolution. To be able to offer those on a 10-cent purchase, no one would think about it here in the West, but it's important to people in developing countries who are earning $2 a day. You can't afford to lose 10 cents or 50 cents by buying something and then not getting it. So that has to be there, but it's not feasible to do it on the card rails. And this is really why the credit and debit cards cannot get out to the poorest people. So I designed this system so that it would actually reach the poorest people. And that is necessary in order to combat, again, the global mobile wallets, because it's a closed system. A closed system is relatively easy to secure. You mentioned like reversing transactions. The global wallets don't have purchases. They don't have that functionality in it because that's a lot of work that they don't know how to do. They're focused on their one product, which is sending funds, and they're very, very good at it. Only when they've exhausted the potential markets will they then start looking at other services. They'll do some, but purchases is a massive job to do. I mean, I'm basically with the clear purchase. If you actually look at our website, on the initial system, phase 5 of our initial system is building in purchase guarantees and dispute resolution. And the reality is that part of it is twice as big as everything else put together for what we're doing. That is a huge undertaking to do.
Right.
And we're building it right into the rails, which is a new way of doing it, I think.
Right. Global mobile wallets is not new either. This money transfers is not new. It's been done for years. Western Union and whoever, the only problem was it was all laborious, manual process, very costly, exactly as you say. Now, electronically, it can be done, and there are many, many different players, not just WhatsApp or Facebook, right?
Yes.
So the bottom line is, same thing, you speed it up, and perhaps the guy could have intercepted in the middle the postal service in a country that delivering mail and done something with it, and we've seen that happen. This puts a little more security around it, and there's no question the address is the poor person, because of the fact that when you look at it, and all people have to do is go look at M-Pesa. Why did M-Pesa start? What was M-Pesa? Who were they serving? They were not serving the big business. You had a stall on, if you're in Kenya, you will know what I'm talking about. If you're going from Nairobi to Nakuru or Naivasha, you would stop on the way, or you're going to Mombasa, you would stop in Voi, whatever, and you are feeling very hot, and you want to get a Coca-Cola for 50 cents or 1 shilling, whatever. Now, by the way, I'm dating myself there, because now you'll get nothing for 1 shilling. But what happens is this poor person who's selling you fruit on the side of the stall doesn't have the money to give you. You take out 100 shillings. And this was enabled by the M-Pesa allowing you to digitally go from one phone to another and then use it, and that's how it grew. And remember, banks were not involved. Remember, banks were not party to this. They came in afterwards crying to the government. So banks have not been the greatest innovators. I used to run operations of a very large, one of the largest banks in the world. And I can tell you, they are not the greatest innovators. People give them credit because that's the only game in town who are protected. So now, when you look at that and saying, can we do something? And can they play a role in it? Yes, of course they can play a role. And should they play a role? Well, obviously, if they've got a government oversight, it makes a lot of sense. But the question is, You're dressing poor, as Nick has got unbanked, because which bank are you going to go to? If you're earning $5 a day or two, the bank's not going to use you, help you there. We have a significant population of unbanked in the United States. Forget about third world countries. So this problem is a global problem. One. Two.
And it's a global opportunity.
And absolutely 100% correct. That's correct. And there's a piece to this. And it's not that Visa rails cannot do it. It's not. They charge fraction of a cent to those guys. But the people involved in the middle who make the money, the banks, they have their markups. And as Nick pointed out, there's fraud and all that and the other. So they try to cover it here, there, and everywhere. So the question becomes, when you don't have that baggage, when you go with this approach, what Clear Purchase has got, you can bypass those costs. So now you can address at much lower cost, because you don't have to worry about some bank somewhere saying, yeah, I need to recover my cost because I gave credit to somebody I shouldn't have. Well, that's not what you do here. You provide, right?
Yeah, the goal is the people that really are at the base of the pyramid, earning $2 a day, roughly. The goal is, if you can provide a range of services to them, they'll find a way out of that. They've proven it with M-Pesa. The goal is to get them to the point where banks can offer them an account and can offer them a credit card or a debit card. And I can connect at the right time, I can connect the Clear Purchase network into the Visa MasterCard networks. So I can connect them together. That's not going to happen initially. That'll happen down the road. But I know how to do that part. But let's get these people to the point where they can start getting these services. And then you can have the mobile money guys and the mobile wallets can start offering card transactions as well. Why not? Let's have all the services available to the poorest people, and they will make the most of it, as is proven by M-Pesa and everyone. I mean, it was amazing. They saw something no one else did. They saw that there was a need, and no one else thought it was there. And boy, were they right.
Yeah. No, in fact, Nick, you can go one step further and say, and because we've talked about fraud, one of the things today, if you go into Visa, MasterCard, Diners, Amex, whatever, when the transaction comes in for authorization, or as Nick would see as a 0100 message, the bottom line is that, the banks go back with 110, which is a message approving the authorization. Now, what happens is your credit card is there, your merchant number is there. Initially, before we went to all this EMV standards and chip and pin, it was flying in the clear. That's why you saw a lot of fraud. And there is still a lot of that happening with the online transaction. If you're chip and pin, you don't have that problem. But a lot of the world still is using the clear transaction, and a lot of data is there, which means you can get compromised in flight, you can get compromised data at rest, at merchant, at third party, whatever. What Nick said something earlier about the transaction being anonymous is very powerful, because if who you are is not going across, if things that are going across allow them to do one-time stuff or whatever, it's fraud, because there's all sorts of validation going on in the background, right? We haven't talked about it. We probably won't go into that.
Yeah, I mean, really, like everything that I worked on was to try and reduce that problem. And the reality is, with a card transaction, when a normal card transaction, when you go to a merchant, you give them your card. And what you're basically doing is you're giving them everything that they need in order to pull money from your account. And the reality is the merchants are not in the business of data security. They're in the business of selling stuff. And so are they going to take as good care of it as anyone else? Well, no, of course they're not. They'll try to, they'll do some, but they're never going to be as focused on data security as the banks and the payment switches. It's just not going to happen, because that is the business of banks and the payment switches. They are in the business of data security. You very, very seldomly hear, like, Bank of America got their system broken into. That doesn't happen. There are much easier targets out there. And the criminal organizations go after the weakest link in the transaction chain, which is the merchant. And that's just the way it is. So I was going, well, how do I, and this is the entire technology behind Clear Purchase, and is how do you have it so that you don't have to give the merchant all this information? So not only are you anonymous in the Clear Purchase network, but you're anonymous to the merchants as well.
Actually, no bank should make a claim that they were not broken into. This guy here can name banks, but he won't do that today. So I'm going to say, but seriously, I'm not the guy anybody wants to take on this issue, because this is my area. But what I'm saying,
no, sorry, just
your point is that they do their best.
The system's broken into, but it's not the payment part that's broken into. They break into other parts of the bank, and that's because you're not going to break into a bank system in order to buy Starbucks.
Oh yeah. Sorry, yes.
That's not. You're not going to
agree.
You're going to do it for other reasons.
Absolutely correct. I agree with you. But Nick, there's another part to this, which is you're absolutely correct for everything you said. And part of the problem is that we are now in a habit of storing too much information. We're storing information we don't need. Like the reason why we're saying, and Nick's addressed this issue, is because if I'm trying to purchase something from a ma in a pa shop who doesn't get a chance, do you get the issue about, a little merchant now having to understand security? That's not his business, as Nick pointed out. Right?
You should never have asked them in the first place.
Correct. Absolutely correct.
At the time, and it was way better than not having it.
Correct. And they were secure because the data was in a shoebox.
Today, well, it was also, there was a physical card.
Correct. There was a physical card. The data was, you swipe, it's in the box.
Yeah.
You can't. Now it's digitized.
When the internet came along, it broke that system.
Correct. Now it's digitized world, and you are selling stuff here, but your data is in some other country over there, 10,000 miles away, and you don't know how secure they are, or what their practices are, or whether people are getting paid well, or their job is at risk, because that's when the fraud starts. So the question, so you're right, you're addressing the issue here big time, no question about it, which is in the authorization, if Jane's the purchaser, what you're doing is there's an issue around pushing the data, pulling the data, right? And that opens you up big time. So what you want to really look at it is you're pushing the data versus pulling it, which means your security is enhanced tremendously, right? Because of the fact that today's world, that's not how it is. So today we're doing both in a big way. There's a standard, because all the people involved in the middle, if you think about just a credit card example for people to drive this point home. If you compromise my credit card and you know the credit card number, just the credit card number, what can you do with it? Nothing, because the number will get you nowhere. If you only got my expiry date of the card, what can you do? Nothing. If you get the 3 digits at the back, which is CVV, card verification value, what can you do with it? Nothing. It's the combination that's dangerous. And what Nick is providing, what Clear Purchase is doing here, is saying, no, the entire stuff is not going to go through. There's validation of different types, which we did not get into at this stage, and we won't here. But you can see it's far more powerful than you can potentially imagine. It just doesn't exist there. And that changes the game drastically, in that what it will do is to make 100% certain, is this person buying Nick? Is it Bashir Fancy's, whoever? And the answer is yes. Now, not the whole data is going, so what are you going to compromise, right? That's the point.
And that's the thing. Why does the merchant need to know who you are or
Correct.
your account number? All they need to know is they're going to get the money. And that's ultimately it. And it is about pull transactions as opposed to push transactions. And this is where Mojaloop did it really well with the Gates Foundation. They did, and then actually mobile wallets do the same. Mobile money does the same. They're all push transactions. And the whole thing with credit cards, debit cards, those are pull transactions. Checks, those are pull transactions. Almost every other type of payment is a pull transaction, except for mobile wallets and mobile money. They do push only, but those are only funds transfers. I've made a purchase a push transaction. That's really what I've done. And it eliminates all of that kind of fraud. It doesn't mean there isn't other fraud. It doesn't mean there aren't other security issues, but I've eliminated the biggest one that affects the card networks. And as a result, I can reduce the fees down to a fraction. But it's all, and this is where with Mojaloop, I mean, they've done really well with that as an interface connecting systems together, so long as you only do push transactions. Their payment switch in the middle is not very good, but the interface is pretty good, and we're going to be using that because it's already starting to be looked at and used in some mobile money systems and other systems around the world. It's a good system. It's a good interface. So we'll use that, but only to do push. Like, don't do pull. Pull is dangerous, and it's important to recognize the difference. If everything is push, if you're a mobile money operator, if every transaction is push, you have authenticated the user before you send money from that user's account. You have done the authentication. On a pull transaction, you get a message saying, give me money. Is it valid? Is it the right place? Is it authorized? Who knows? You have to just accept it. And then the user comes back and says, what happened to my money? That's the danger with pull transactions. So yes, the Gates Foundation did very well with just doing push on Mojaloop. But they haven't done, they don't know how to do purchases, which is fine because most people don't understand the complexities of it. And that's what I bring to the table.
Correct. And this is why countries at the highest level, so if you look at the government, well, who's the player there? It's the central bank. Central Bank of Uganda, Central Bank of Ghana, Central Bank of Nigeria, Central Bank of Zimbabwe, or Kenya, Tanzania, whatever. Or for that matter, in the Far East as well. And so we're talking about global. Because if you look at whether it's US, Canada, same thing, they need to get involved in saying, by the way, are my rules followed? Now, one of the things which is interesting is in these type of countries, they got governance in place to oversee. In Canada, they have, and in US to some extent it exists. The thing is that you turn around and do that. UK has that. In the Bank of England says, here are my rules. And then the EU. That is what needs to happen for Africa, where the governments turn around and say, hang on, we're going to get country to country together. If you can't get 100 people together, forget about it. Start with the 3-4 you do a lot of business with.
Yes.
Right? And then get the people involved.
So I want to go a little bit further because there's things on this diagram that we haven't talked about.
Yes, go ahead.
And that is where we integrate an identity system into this. And this is more of a conceptual level, though this is realistic because Clear Purchase is about interoperability incredibly securely for financial transactions. However, it can actually be extended a little bit further to other things as well. And one of the things that I don't have the background and technology to do is to do a secured identity card type of, like a smart identity card, though there are others that do. The value though, if you put a smart identity card type system, connecting it to the rails that I'm building, which are anonymous, you can start doing all kinds of other things. You can start, this is where all these other boxes on the diagram come from, is that we can start processing transactions anonymously between all the different players attached to a verified Jane Doe in this case, where Jane Doe's name doesn't pass through the network. And so it's almost like sanitized instructions and sanitized data because there's no name attached to it. And what that means is that it's secured because I assume at some point someone's going to break into our system. Nothing is invulnerable. And when they do, there's nothing of value to take because there are no names attached to anything and no account numbers out there that would identify anybody. That's the whole point of the intellectual property that I've developed, is to make it so that there's nothing of value to take. So why break into it? There isn't any. But what it does is it facilitates. And so it can facilitate a positive identifying of Jane Doe without James Doe's name passing through the network. And so you can have data between all these different players that is verified relating to someone and yet is secured against being stolen within the clear purchase network, but also, and here's an important one that we're talking about at the beginning, and this is what part of this is about, because there are no names attached, there's no data to be taken anywhere. We can't take data to other countries because we've got no names. So there's nothing to take. And that's, even if someone breaks in, there's nothing to take. This is, you mentioned a lot of companies are about grabbing as much information as possible about users. And part of the reason why the US is going to places like Kenya and others and saying, hey, allow us to just export all your data is because that's the business model of Facebook and others, but Facebook in particular. They make a business out of your data and using your data. That's where they make their money. I've very deliberately said, I don't want that information because that's dangerous. It's dangerous for everything that I'm doing to have a name attached. And so I specifically designed it not to. And so there's nothing to take. There's nothing for Clear Purchase to go elsewhere and say, hey, look at all this information. There's no information to do it with. I'm not taking it. I can't. That's part of the point.
And Nick, that's a very powerful point, because if you're Facebook, your business revolves around collecting everybody's data, monetizing, selling the results of that, but you're not playing in it. Now, one of the things that Nick just said is a very powerful thing, and I want to turn on and say, which is when he talked about the people breaking in. If I was advising security guys, and I do, and everybody knows I was head of risk management security for Visa globally, I would turn around and say, by the way, don't make this assumption that you do whatever to try and stop the bad guys coming in. Are you going to be successful? As Nick points out, no, somebody's going to break in somewhere sometime. So the question of thinking should be, assume that they're breaking into your thing anyway. Make that assumption that somebody's going to get in. Now what do I do to protect my stuff? That's what Nick has just produced here, that if you get in, you're going to get nothing. And that's a very powerful thing from a payment standpoint, from any standpoint, because what it does is says, okay, I will do everything right possible to stop you at the entrance and not coming into my courtyard or into my house. But I will make the assumption, in spite of doing all this thing, that you might get it. Now I do that, as Nick says, what are you going to get? Nothing. And that is very smart way. It is all about this thinking, because remember, your data is not being sold by Clear Purchase or any of us, right? Which means that is the solution you want to think it. Because anybody else who's trying to come and say, oh, do this, I'm Facebook. Why do they want the data? Why would the government get involved in saying, don't forget your privacy rules, we're going to do this? Is because your data is being manipulated, monetized for their benefit. What does it do for you? So your question has to, why would I do this? What is right?
There's one more important.
We need to wrap up, because I have a hard stop now.
Okay, I've got a very, very quick point on this. Look at this huge network here. It's going to take years to build this, but look at this huge network. And you're going to have the global mobile wallets sitting off on their own. They're going to want to be a part of this. And we're going to let them be part of this. And when they do, now they're subject to the same regulations as everyone else. That's how we play this game. They get to play as well, but now they're playing under the same rules. And now regulations covers mobile wallets as well, the global ones, because we will hold them to it.
Absolutely. I think Nick, this is fantastic. And by the way, we didn't get to talk to it. Maybe we'll have to do yet another session, which has to do with linking the voice signatures in this. That would actually also, there are multiple authentication going on here. And yes. I think Nick has done a fantastic job of getting the point across. And folks, thank you. We will have this recording up on our website, biztek.org, and we'll put the link on LinkedIn. So thank you for participating today. And we look forward to, as not only bringing this, but answering your question. And if any country, any organization or bank or central bank wants to talk to us privately, let us know. We can put one together for you specifically to talk about the issues. We're here to help, remember.
Yeah. So I'm going to put this diagram on the Clear Purchase website. It'll be there in a couple of hours or so. If you want a copy of it, you're welcome to.
Fantastic, guys. And thank you. I have a couple of people have to give me the number. So thanks very much. I will be in touch, folks. Thank you very much. Nick, once again, thanks for doing this. And I will catch up with you later in the afternoon after another call is done just now. So guys, thank you. All the very best and have a happy Thanksgiving. If you're in Canada, if you're elsewhere, enjoy your weekend.
All right. Thank you, Bashir. Thank you, everyone.
My pleasure.